What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So, in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the Audience Network original series, You, Me, Her, and how I think the show's budget, or lack thereof, ultimately kept it from realizing its full potential. Now, this is a show that flew way under the radar from what I could tell. So, it's entirely possible that not only have most of you not seen this show yet, but that most of you have maybe never even heard of this show yet. So, with that in mind, this video will contain spoilers, so if you don't want to know anything that happens in the show, you might want to exit this video right now. And with that being said, no more wasting time, let's get into it. You, Me, Her is an American-Canadian comedy drama television series that revolves around a vanilla suburban married couple who seek to spice up their mundane romantic life by entering into a polyamorous relationship with another woman. Now, this series is set in Portland, Oregon, and it was created by John Scott Shepherd. It stars Greg Poehler as Jack Trzakarski, a student counselor at a local high school. Rachel Blanchard stars as Emma Trzakarski, an architect and Jack's wife. Now, Priscilla Faya stars as Isabel Izzy Silva, a graduate student in psychology and, at the beginning of the series, a part-time call girl. And it also stars Melanie Papalia as Nina Martone, Izzy's best friend and roommate, who also, at the beginning, may or may not have been a call girl as well. Now, this show is promoted as TV's first polyromantic comedy, and it premiered on March 22nd, 2016 on the Audience Network, and it was renewed for a second and third season shortly thereafter. On July 27th of 2018, the series was renewed for a fourth and fifth season. And on May 10th of 2019, the Audience Network announced that the fifth season would be the show's last. However, the Audience Network ended operations in May of 2020, prior to airing the show's remaining seasons. The season was released in full on Crave in Canada on June 7th of 2020, and seasons 1 through 5 were aired on Netflix in Europe and Latin America in 2022. And also, all 5 seasons were found to be available in the United States on Freevee, and the show can now be streamed in its entirety on Amazon Prime. Now, the series currently does not have a critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but it does have an audience score of 83%. And it's not on Metacritic at all, which again shows you just how, maybe, under the radar this show was. But it does have a 7 out of 10 on IMDb, and that's based on almost 11,000 reviews. So I'll start by saying that I typically would not cover an obscure series like this one here on YouTube, but I took a special interest in this particular show because I felt I could use it as a case study of sorts. The show seemed to have a very small budget, which piqued my interest initially, mostly because I write shorts, web series, and features that will likely have minimal resources available to get through production. So I thought it would be interesting to see what a show in a similar financial position that managed to also get fairly widespread distribution, despite that fact, might look like. And I'll start with the positive. This show definitely had its moments. The show's premise was certainly a fresh take on the romantic comedy genre in television format, which is what originally drew my attention to it when I was deep scrolling through shows on Amazon Prime looking for something that I hadn't seen before. And as I began watching the show, I noticed pretty quickly that it was kind of funny. The writing was everything you would expect from a show like this, pretty much. And the comedic chops and the timing of the cast wasn't half bad for a group of actors that I had never heard of before. But this show certainly had its shortcomings, and those shortcomings all revolve around something that I have to say makes me ask myself a serious question given my current access to capital as I continue to plan my very own projects. What happens to a good TV show when it doesn't have enough money to be what it's supposed to? So, given that, let's start with the show's budget. And I want to be clear, I don't exactly know what the show's budget was. that kind of information is usually pretty hard to come by, especially in the case of lesser known or watched shows like this one. But I could tell almost right from the start of the pilot episode, especially throughout the first couple of seasons, that the show had a small budget, maybe even a shoestring budget, which mightily hurt the show's production value. Now, the show again premiered on the Audience Network back in 2016, and I had never heard of this network until I happened across this show. But I did some light digging while I was watching it, and the fact that the network ended operations before the show could even finish its 5-season run should tell you everything that you need to know. Now, again, You, Me, Her is a 30-minute dark comedy, again, about a married couple who's looking to spice up their sex life by involving a third party. And throughout the show, we watch them very awkwardly court that third party into being in the relationship with them. So, given that, I thought I would use HBO's Insecure as a comp, as it's also a 30-minute dark comedy, but except it's about an awkward and professional and romantic experiences of a contemporary black woman. So just stay with me here. Now, HBO's Insecure had a per episode budget of about $3.5 million. And if I had to guess, this show had less than $1 million per episode, maybe even less than $500K per episode. And the lack of resources available to the show caused a whole mess of problems. First, the lack of access to high-level production equipment like lighting, and maybe even the camera that the series was shot on in the early going immediately shows up on screen. And this show was shot mostly in Canada from what I understand, even though it's supposed to be set in Oregon. And I know that sometimes, people will do that to, again, save money. Secondly, the series was too long, especially given the apparent challenges the show might have already been facing with lack of resources. The show just simply didn't need 50 episodes in order to tell the story that they ended up telling us. Again, this was a story about a married 30-something-year-old couple who meet a woman and basically court her to become the third in their polyamorous relationship. And, consequently, the show starts off with Izzy being an escort who's kind of serving both of their needs separately. But as the first season goes on, they decide to terminate the escort arrangement and make their interest in Izzy purely romantic and hopefully permanent. So with the setup being what it is, there's really only one thing we as the audience care about. Do Jack and Emma end up with Izzy permanently or not? Now, the rest is just background noise. And I just don't think we needed 5 years with 50 30-minute episodes to glean the answer to that question, if I'm being honest. And I mean, that's just my 2 cents. Third, this show couldn't seem to hold on to prominent supporting cast members from season to season. And again, I'm assuming this maybe came down to money. In season 1, Shayla Horsdal plays Lori Matherfield, the Tchaikovsky's nosy neighbor. She also had a daughter, Ava Matherfield, who blackmails the pair after finding out they're in a poly relationship with Izzy, played by Lane McNeil. Now, these 2 characters were really funny and both really impactful as far as the story was concerned in seasons 1 and 2. But by season 3, they were both gone, apparently having moved away, in the story. And I also thought that Jennifer Spence was really funny as Carmen Amari, the wife of Dave Amari, neighbors to the Tchaikovskys and Emma's best friend. But she was noticeably missing in the final season. And the showrunners did their best, I suppose, replacing her with Aaliyah O'Brien, who played Sophie, Dave's sister, who came into town to help him with his kids while his wife was away. But it wasn't the same. And here again, I think this really, really, really hurt the show. Lastly, for a show that featured a lot of sexual situations, especially earlier in the seasons, there was absolutely no sex in this show. Really, I mean, every time we got to what would have been a sex scene, the showrunners and the writers apparently decided to fast forward right past it, almost like they were embarrassed to showcase what a polyamorous relationship looked like from a sexual standpoint. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying we needed to get the Idol, with overly gratuitous sex scenes every 10 minutes. But the show seemed to be afraid to go ahead and say what it was trying to say. Even with it being a dark comedy, I felt like the showrunners worked really hard to shy away from any kind of display of sexuality whatsoever. And when you juxtapose that with HBO's Insecure, a show that wasn't afraid at all to go there in the telling of Issa's story, I think mostly because Issa and the other showrunners understood that sex was a part of the life of the character, as well as it was the lives of the other characters in that show, and that leaving that part out would have been like leaving out a part of them. I think that the way that a character has sex in a story and who they have it with, the situations that involves why they have it, speak to in some ways who they are as people, just as much as how they dress and how they talk, and it helps inform the choices that we watch them make in the aftermath of such experiences. I'm not saying we needed a crap ton of nudity. I'm not even saying we necessarily needed any graphic nudity at all. But I do kind of wish we had at least gotten some sexual context in this show, because even after watching the show, I don't anymore have an idea of the sexual dynamics of a poly relationship than I did before watching it. I didn't really learn anything in that regard. All in all, this show was conceived from a pretty good idea. And it seemed to have been developed fairly well too, with the story going about where I thought it would, except for maybe the fact that Jack never leaves the throuple like both of the women did at some point in the story. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But I absolutely think this show would have benefited from being on a major cable network, which would have meant having a larger budget and even access to some bigger name talent. I think if that had happened, more people would be talking about this show as one of the better dark comedies in recent memory. But what do you guys think? Have you seen You, Me, Her? If you have, did you enjoy it? Or did you think it was lacking in scope and production value? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you who might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. Also, be sure to go check out themadScreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.